Chapter 1: Invisible Wounds. She called me a burden and told her coworkers I was poor, a woman she had been forced to drag through life. She cut me off, walked out of my house, and never imagined that the company she worshipped, the job she bragged about, and the CEO she admired existed because of me. I am Marianne Hale, and the day her boss bowed to me on stage was the day my daughter's entire world shattered. Let me tell you how the truth finally caught up with her. I was 58 years old the day my daughter told me she was done with me. And the funny thing is, I still had dish soap on my hands when it happened. The sun was sliding through the kitchen window of my small wooden house on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, catching the chipped rim of my favorite mug, the one I refused to throw away. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked at nothing in particular. Inside, everything important was coming apart in the span of a few sentences. For the last decade, I had kept my life deliberately small. After my divorce back in 2011, I traded a glass condo and a downtown parking spot for this modest place, tucked among fir trees and wet grass. I drove an aging silver Subaru from 2014 that rattled a little when it hit potholes. My wardrobe was a rotation of jeans, soft sweaters, and sneakers you could stand in all day. People who saw me at the grocery store probably assumed I was a retired librarian, or maybe a nurse who worked nights. No one looking at me would guess that from 2005 to 2020, I had helped raise money for young tech founders who were barely old enough to rent a car. In that other life, I had been the financial advisor you called when you had a half-built idea and just enough desperation to chase it. I sat in windowless conference rooms, translated jargon into numbers, and watched anxious 20-something founders sign term sheets like they were signing away their lungs. Some of those companies crashed and burned like everyone expected. A few of them did not. I learned early that the loudest pitch was not always the smartest, and that the people who truly understood money did not feel the need to shout about it. Eventually, I stopped advising on the surface and moved into the shadows instead. I became what people in that world like to call an angel investor, though I never saw myself as any kind of angel. I chose 6 companies over the years, quiet ones with solid products and founders who listened more than they talked. One of them was a small digital media and analytics startup out of Phoenix called Nova Pulse Media. In 2015, when they were down to a few months of runway and the bank kept putting them on hold, I wired them $280,000 and told them to use it like it was the last favor they would ever get. They survived the slump of 2017 on that lifeline. I watched from a distance as their platform expanded, as their logo started appearing in industry articles, as their numbers crept from interesting to impressive. I never bragged about it. I never even mentioned it out loud to the one person you might expect me to tell. My daughter, Jenna. Jenna was 30 now and lived in Phoenix, where the sunlight was hard-edged and unforgiving, and the people in her circle seemed to like it that way. She worked as a marketing specialist at Nova Pulse, ironically enough, and called the company her golden ticket. She posted polished photos of the glass office and the neon company sign, the branded coffee cups and the rooftop happy hours. She talked about analytics and campaigns and growth like she was describing something holy. To her, success meant clear skin, a white couch, and a job title that looked good on a networking profile. To her, I did not look like success. She had not visited Portland in almost a year. When she finally did, it was on a gray Saturday when the clouds pressed low over the trees and the air smelled like rain. She stepped inside with a wheeled suitcase and a blazer draped over her arm, eyes flicking around my kitchen like she was inspecting a rental listing. "You have not changed anything," she said, dropping her bag by the door without asking where it should go. Her tone had that flat edge I had come to recognize through the phone. She did not need quotation marks for me to hear the judgment. Same old cabinet, same old couch, same old car out front. I said that things worked, and I did not see a reason to replace them just to impress people who would forget about it by next week. I tried to keep my voice light, but the atmosphere between us was already thick. We sat at the small table by the window, and I poured coffee into the chipped mug and a newer one I kept for guests. She tapped her nails against the wood while I talked about the book club I had joined, the trail I liked to walk near the river, the way the maple in the yard turned the street gold in the fall. She listened for a while, then shook her head and laughed without humor. "You live like someone who gave up," she said. "You could move somewhere warmer. You could downsize the car, get a place closer to town, at least try to be part of something. But you just sit here like the world stopped in 2011. Her words stung because there was a small corner of truth in them. My life had grown smaller. I had made it that way on purpose, but I knew that explanation wasn't going to satisfy her. I tried telling her that peace and boredom were not the same thing. I tried explaining to her that I liked waking up to birds instead of traffic. I tried gently reminding her that not everyone needed their life to look like an advertisement. She was not interested in that conversation. Instead, she pivoted to money. "The thing is, I cannot keep doing this. I cannot keep sending you money every time something breaks, or pretending it's not stressing me out. I'm trying to build a future, Mom. I have real goals. I cannot drag you over the finish line with me." The funny part is, I had never once asked her to send me anything. There were a few times she had insisted on paying for a flight or slipping a card with some cash in my hand at Christmas, and every time I had tried to give it back. In her mind, though, she had turned herself into my provider, the one with the bright city job and the modern apartment who was obligated to rescue the woman in the woods. I told her I was fine. I told her my bills were paid, that the roof didn't leak, that the Subaru still passed inspection. I said that just because I didn't talk about my finances didn't mean I was destitute. I started to say more, to edge a little closer to the truth, but she cut me off with a raised hand. "I'm tired," she said. "Tired of worrying that you'll call and need something. Tired of feeling guilty when I book a weekend trip or buy something nice because all I can see is you up here with that old mug and that old car. I need to stop feeling like your safety net. I need you to figure it out." I could have told her that I had built several other people's safety nets from scratch. I could have reminded her that the company she worked for would not exist in its current form without my money and my early faith. I could have mentioned the portfolio statements that arrived once a quarter, the ones I kept in a locked drawer in the bedroom, because even the envelope looked too loud. Instead, I looked at my daughter's face, the tight jaw, the tired eyes, the way her shoulders hunched as though she had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had finally decided to set it down. I thought about all the ways her generation measured worth, the constant comparisons, the curated lives on screens. I thought about how I had chosen secrecy, thinking it would protect her, and how it had become yet another thing that stood between us. "If you need to stop," I said quietly, "then stop. I don't want you to resent me for existing." Her expression didn't soften. "Good," she said, "because I'm done. No more transfers, no more bailing you out, no more feeling responsible for whatever happens up here. And honestly, Mom, I need some space from you too, emotionally. I can't keep having the same conversation." She stood, grabbed her blazer, and wheeled her suitcase back toward the door. The whole visit had lasted barely an hour. On the porch, she paused with her hand on the knob, but whatever she might have been about to say dissolved. The door shut hard enough to rattle the glass. For a long moment, I didn't move. The house felt too quiet, like a soundproof room. I could still smell her perfume in the hallway, something sharp and expensive and citrusy. My chest ached in that dull way that didn't quite become tears. I walked back to the sink and rinsed the coffee cups in lukewarm water, my hands moving automatically. Inside my head, though, nothing was automatic. There was the familiar guilt that I must have failed her somehow, that I hadn't prepared her for a world where love and money collide in ugly ways. There was the sting of her words, the idea that I was a weight she had to carry. Underneath all of that, there was a smaller, colder understanding that this was not entirely about me. Jenna was trying to outrun her own fear of not being enough, and in her rush, she had mistaken me for the anchor. I dried my hands on a towel and reached for my phone more out of habit than intention. The screen lit up with a cluster of notifications, most of them forgettable. One, however, sat at the top of the list, time-stamped only a few minutes earlier. From Ryan Caldwell, the subject line read, "Investment discussion for upcoming Series C, confidential." I opened it, and a neat block of text filled the screen. He thanked me for my early faith in Novapulse, reminded me that my initial capital had been foundational, and explained that the company was preparing a $20 million Series C funding round. He wanted to know if I would consider arriving a few days early for the next board meeting to review their plans and potentially take the lead position in the round. I read it twice, then scrolled to the attached documents. Forecasts, projections, valuations, all the familiar language of my previous life. At the bottom, in a single sentence, he mentioned how proud the team was of their growth, how excited their staff in Phoenix were, how people like Jenna were driving the brand forward. I stood in the middle of my narrow kitchen, barefoot on the cool tile, the phone's glow the only bright thing in the room. My daughter had just walked out, believing she was cutting off a dependent, a woman who needed her to survive. On my screen, the chief executive of her golden ticket employer was asking me to help decide the future of the company she thought defined her worth. The refrigerator hummed to life. Somewhere outside, a car drove by, its headlights sweeping briefly across the window and then disappearing. I let out a slow breath I had not realized I was holding. There would be a time to answer Ryan, to look through the numbers, to decide exactly how I wanted to step back into that world. For now, I simply stared at my reflection in the dark glass of the window, the small blue square of light from my phone reflected beside my face, and understood with a clarity that almost hurt that the story between my daughter and me had just reached the point it could not turn away from. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 2. The Mother She Never Saw. The email from Ryan sat in my inbox like a door half open, and once I stepped through it, there was no way to pretend things had not changed. I wrote him back that night, a short reply saying I would be willing to talk and asking when he wanted me in Phoenix. His answer came 10 minutes later, friendly and efficient, suggesting a meeting early the following week at the Novapulse headquarters. By the time I set my phone face down on the counter, the flight confirmation was already in my mind, even if I had not clicked on anything yet. I booked a ticket the next morning while the fog still clung to the trees around my house. Portland to Phoenix midweek, one carry-on and a worn leather tote that had seen more airports than most people ever would. I did not tell Jenna I was coming. There were a few moments when my thumb hovered over her name in my contacts, an impulse to send some casual message, something like, "I will be in town, do you want to grab coffee?" Every time, I saw again the way she had looked at me in my kitchen, all tight lines and tired contempt, and I put the phone back down. The desert air hit me in the face as soon as I stepped out of Sky Harbor. It was that dry, relentless heat that felt personal, the kind that made Portland seem like a distant memory. A car from the company picked me up at the curb, a sleek electric sedan with a polite driver who called me Miss Hale and double-checked the address even though the Nova Pulse building rose from the sprawl like it wanted to be seen from space. The office was all glass and steel and little touches of bright orange, the company color. In the lobby, a scrolling screen greeted visitors with animated metrics that would have made my old colleagues drool. A receptionist with a perfect blowout and a badge that read Lauren smiled and handed me a visitor sticker, then called upstairs to let Ryan know I had arrived. On the elevator right up, I caught my reflection in the mirrored doors. Gray at my temples, lines around my mouth, simple navy sweater and black pants that did nothing to declare wealth or status. I looked like exactly what Jenna thought I was, a woman who had stepped out of a modest catalog, unremarkable in every way. The thought settled somewhere in my chest, heavy but not unexpected. The doors opened onto the executive floor and Ryan was already waiting near the conference room, hands in his pockets, tie slightly loosened like he wanted to look approachable. He walked toward me with that brisk confidence I remembered from the early days when Nova Pulse was just slides and hope. He said it had been too long, that he was glad to finally thank me in person for what my investment had done back in 2017 when the market dipped and their biggest client almost walked. He reminded me that my money had literally kept the lights on. He talked about how the company had grown since then, how the analytics platform now handled data for brands across the country, and how they were preparing for an initial public offering in 2 years and needed their cap table to send the right message. We moved into the conference room, all polished wood and glass walls overlooking the city. He pulled up charts on his screen, walked me through revenue lines and user growth, burn rate and runway. It was familiar territory. My brain slipped into the old rhythm, weighing risk and potential, while my heart tried to ignore the way his words brushed against the life my daughter was so proud of down on the lower floors. At one point, he stood with his hand on a graph showing projected revenue through 2027 and said they wanted me as a strategic lead investor, not just capital, but a name with a track record. He explained that such a position would come with a board seat, with voting power on certain structural decisions, including senior staffing. He mentioned the need to stabilize leadership in marketing and product before the public market started paying closer attention. I let him finish, then asked questions about governance, about how they intended to handle internal promotions, about their philosophy on performance reviews. He seemed pleased that I went there. He said they wanted adults in the room who understood both people and numbers. When the meeting wrapped, Ryan walked me out himself. We stepped into the hallway just as a group of people turned the corner, voices raised in that strained way that tried and failed to sound professional. At the center of it was Jenna. She wore a fitted blazer and heels that clicked sharply on the polished floor, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun I had only ever seen in photos. Beside her was a woman with a lanyard that read PR manager, Margot something on the badge. They were arguing in low but intense tones about a campaign that had underperformed. I caught fragments as they passed, references to click-through rates and brand alignment, and someone failing to follow directions. Jenna gestured with her hands, the way she did when she was cornered. She said the brief had been vague, that the data team had not delivered on time, and that she had been trying to salvage a broken strategy. Margot said the client did not care whose fault it was, that what they saw was Nova Pulse missing a target. Her voice softened slightly when she added that Jenna needed to focus less on defending herself and more on fixing the issue. They moved past us without noticing. Jenna glanced in our direction, but her eyes slid over me without recognition. To her, I was just another visitor in a hallway full of them. For a second, I thought about saying her name, but the word caught in my throat. I watched her back as she walked away, shoulders squared like armor. Ryan exhaled quietly beside me and said he was sorry I had to witness that. He said Jenna was brilliant, truly, one of their strongest voices in campaign strategy when she was on, but that she could be difficult. He used the word prickly. He said she took any criticism as a personal attack, that it made collaboration complicated. I said nothing. The air in the hallway felt thin. After he left me with his assistant near the elevators, I lingered by a window for a moment. Two younger employees stood a few steps away, their conversation barely above a whisper, but not quite low enough to be private. One of them said she was smart but exhausting, that she always had to prove she did everything on her own. The other laughed softly and mentioned that Jenna talked a lot about her poor mom in Oregon, how she had to help support her, how she had clawed her way out of a nothing background. They both agreed it was admirable in a way, but also that it got old, all that drama packaged as grit. I felt the words like a hand pressed against a bruise. Poor mom. Nothing background. I knew they weren't being cruel, not intentionally. They were repeating the story Jenna had told them, the one where she was the savior and I was the weight. The assistant, a neat man named Victor, with a leather portfolio tucked under his arm, approached me then and asked if I had a few minutes for some paperwork. He led me to a smaller meeting room, placed a thick folder on the table, and said it contained internal profiles and organizational charts so I could understand the structure I would be stepping into if I accepted the role Ryan had outlined. He hesitated, like he was debating whether to add something, then said there was also a subset of performance summaries for key employees in marketing and product. He said the board liked lead investors to know which teams were stable and which needed attention. Later, in the back seat of the car taking me to my hotel, I rested the folder on my lap without opening it. Phoenix blurred past the window, a mix of stucco houses and strip malls and brilliant blue sky. The driver made small talk about the heat and the traffic. I nodded in the right places, but my mind was still in that hallway, listening to two strangers discuss the version of me my own daughter had created. In the quiet of the hotel room, with the air conditioner humming and the curtains drawn against the afternoon glare, I finally sat on the edge of the bed and flipped the folder open. There were charts and diagrams, lists of names and titles. Toward the middle, stapled neatly, was a packet labeled Marketing Performance Review Summary. My eyes found her name before I was ready. Jenna Hale, Senior Marketing Specialist. Underneath the basic details, a paragraph of typed evaluation. Talented, creative, strong instincts. Then the other side of the ledger, the parts most people hoped would be skipped. Highly defensive in feedback settings, struggles with collaboration under pressure, tendency to externalize blame leading to tension with peers. At the bottom, in a different font, was a note that looked like it had been added by hand before being scanned. Recommendation that she receive coaching on managing stress and perception, with a simple warning that without change, she was at risk of stagnation or eventual exit. I read it twice. My first impulse was anger, not at the company, but at the pattern I recognized. Jenna bracing against any hint of weakness, building stories to keep herself upright. My second impulse was something closer to sorrow. She was so afraid of being small that she had turned the person who loved her most into proof that she was big. I closed the folder and set it on the nightstand. The room was very still. Somewhere down the hall, a door shut softly and a television murmured through the wall. I laid back on the bed, eyes on the ceiling, feeling the weight of what I now knew, settling into place around the weight of what I had always known, and let my breathing even out while I considered what kind of role I was willing to play in the next part of her story.
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 3. Cracks in Her Ambition.
The next morning, I parked my rental car at the far end of the Nova Pulse slot and turned off the engine, but I did not get out. The sun was already bright, bouncing off windshields and glass, and people in badges and branded jackets streamed toward the building in little clusters. It felt like watching a movie with the sound turned down, everyone moving with more purpose than they probably felt. I had asked Ryan for another meeting to go over the details of the deal. He suggested late morning, which left me with time and nowhere in particular to be. So I sat there, with the air from the vents slowly turning warm, and told myself I was only waiting because I did not want to be too early for the boardroom. Then I saw her. Jenna strode across the asphalt in a fitted blazer and black pants, phone in one hand, laptop bag hanging off one shoulder. Beside her walked a woman with dark hair and sharp posture, whose badge read Harper Lane when they drew close enough for me to make it out. I recognized the quiet authority in the way she moved. Department head, I guessed, before I even saw the small text beneath her name that confirmed it. They stopped a few spaces away from my car, close enough that I could see the tension in Jenna's jaw. Their voices carried just enough for me to catch pieces. Harper spoke first, her tone low but hard. "You are talented, Jenna, but your ego is tearing everything apart." Jenna's mouth tightened. "I am not going to apologize for caring about my work. I did everything I could with a broken brief and late data. That campaign was set up to fail." Harper shook her head slightly. "Clients do not care whose fault it is. They see Nova Pulse. They see our name. Every time something misses, we lose credibility. And every meeting turns into you defending yourself instead of listening to what needs to change. So this is all on me. No one else dropped any balls. Good to know." Her voice had that brittle edge I knew too well, the one she used when she felt cornered and refused to show it. "I am not saying that," Harper replied. "I am saying you make it nearly impossible for people to work with you when things go wrong. You are smart. You see angles other people miss. But if you keep pushing everyone away, no one will be standing next to you when something goes right." Jenna looked away for a second, out toward the road, then back at her boss. "Maybe I am just not cut out for all this teamwork talk," she said. "Maybe I should just find somewhere that actually appreciates what I bring to the table." Harper took a breath, as if she were trying to decide whether to push harder or back off. "You could be incredible here," she said finally, more quietly, "but not like this. Think about it." She turned and headed toward the building, leaving Jenna standing alone on the painted line of an empty parking space. From where I sat, hidden by the angle of my windshield and the morning glare, I saw her wipe quickly at the corner of one eye before squaring her shoulders and walking in after her. Watching her like that pulled something old and fragile loose inside me. I thought about another morning years earlier in a different kitchen, when Jenna had been 12 and still shorter than the refrigerator. She had handed me a homemade card on printer paper, folded in half, marker bleeding through the creases. Inside, in large, uneven letters, she had written that I was the smartest and strongest mom in the world, that I made hard things look easy, that when she grew up, she wanted to be just like me. I had kept that card in a box with other small artifacts of her childhood. Somewhere between that day and this parking lot, the girl who wrote those words had started listening more to the world than to her own memory of me. Comparisons had crept in, little messages that said success needed to look a certain way, that love had to be performed and monetized to count. I knew how relentless that could be. I also knew I had not done enough to fight it. A car honked behind me, jolting me back to the present. I started the engine and pulled out, following the flow of vehicles toward the exit. Instead of turning right toward the hotel, I drifted left into the downtown streets where coffee shops and lunch spots clustered near offices. I found a place to park near a brick building with big windows and a chalkboard sign out front advertising cold brew and pastries. Inside, the air smelled like espresso and burned sugar. People hunched over laptops at almost every table, cords snaking toward outlets. I ordered a coffee at the counter and was waiting when the door opened behind me and familiar voices floated in. Jenna walked in with a man I recognized from the folder in my hotel room, even though we had never been introduced. Jonas Reed, senior data analyst, early 30s, solid performance reviews. In person, he looked thoughtful in a way no report could show, glasses sliding down his nose as he scanned the menu, even though it probably hadn't changed in months. They took a small table by the window, not noticing me tucked into a corner seat with my back mostly to them. I did not intend to eavesdrop, but their conversation carried over the music. "I'm just saying," Jonas was saying, "it might help to listen to what Harper is actually telling you. What Harper is telling me is that I am the problem every time something is less than perfect. It's exhausting." "You know that's not what she said," Jonas countered. "She said you make it hard to fix things when you come in with your fists up all the time." "My fists are not up. I am just not going to sit there and smile while people act like I dropped every ball." Jonas sighed, stirring his coffee. "Look," he said, "I've worked with you on enough campaigns to know you care more than most people here. You stay late, you triple-check things, you come up with ideas no one else thinks of. But when anything goes slightly sideways, your first instinct is to point out all the ways it's not your fault. That makes everyone tense, including you." "I am not going to take the blame for other people's mistakes," she answered. "No one is asking you to. They're asking you to stop making every postmortem a courtroom. Sometimes things just go wrong. Sometimes it's a mix. If you could take a breath and say what you're going to do differently without the wall of defensiveness, I think people would meet you halfway." There was a pause. I could imagine her expression without seeing it, the way her mouth pinched when someone hit too close to home. "So you all think I'm the difficult one?" she said more softly. "I think," he said, "that you're scared. And when you're scared, you get sharp. And when you get sharp, people pull back. It doesn't mean they don't respect you. It means they don't know how to reach you." "I just don't want to end up like my mom," she blurted. My hand tightened around my cup. Working herself to death for nothing, ending up in some tiny house in the middle of nowhere, pretending she's okay with it because she has no choice. I can't be that. So yeah, maybe I fight harder than I need to. At least I'm not going to sink quietly. Jonas was quiet for a moment. He said, "Maybe you've got the wrong idea of what sinking looks like. And maybe you got the wrong idea of what she actually is. But that's a different conversation." "I don't want a different conversation," Jenna said quickly. "I just want this one to be over." She pushed her chair back with a scrape and went to refill her coffee. I stared down at the table in front of me, at the ring of condensation my own cup had left. It was a strange feeling, hearing your life condensed into a fear someone else was trying to outrun. Later that afternoon, I sat across from Ryan in the same conference room as before, a pen in my hand and a neat stack of documents between us. We went line by line through the terms. Capital committed, board seat granted, voting rights spelled out. He pointed to a clause about governance, explaining how major personnel decisions would require board awareness, how recurring issues in leadership positions would be discussed at the highest level. His tone was calm and businesslike, but there was a flicker of something more personal in his eyes. He said, I will be straightforward with you, Marianne. There are a handful of people we're watching closely. We need the right faces and the right roles before we take this company public. That includes marketing leadership and some of the senior specialists. You mean Jenna, I said. He didn't pretend otherwise. She's on that list, he admitted. Her results are inconsistent. When she hits, she really hits. When she misses, it's rough. And the way she handles feedback makes it harder. She could grow into someone we promote, or she could burn out and leave. At this point, it could go either way. He tapped the signature line with the back of the pen. You should know that
As lead investor, you will have a voice in conversations about people like her, he said. If you want us to handle her with extra care, I need to understand that now. The pen felt heavier than it should have. If she did not work here and you only had her performance on paper, I asked, what would you do? He considered that. I would give her a clear development plan and a time frame. Support her, but hold her accountable. If she showed growth, great. If not, I would let her go before she poisoned the culture. I thought of her in the parking lot with Harper, of her in the cafe with Jonas, of her at my kitchen table calling me an anchor tied to her ankle. Then treat her like anyone else in that position, I said quietly. No more, no less. You are sure? He asked. I nodded. Whatever happens, I said, I want it to be because of her choices, not mine. Ryan hesitated, then leaned back slightly. There is something else you should hear, he said, not because it changes the terms, but because it affects perception. Some of her colleagues have mentioned that she talks about you a lot, about supporting you, about how hard it was to climb out of what she calls a nothing place. The story has made some people wary. They feel like everything around her is tinged with drama. He paused, watching my face. She says you are struggling, he went on, that you do not really understand what she does, that she is the first one in the family to really make it. It is her narrative. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm saying it's out there. The room seemed to narrow for a second, the edges of my vision tightening. I felt the old instinct to defend myself, to set the record straight, to tell him that the nothing place she described was the same house that had sheltered her for years, that the woman who did not understand her world had once built the scaffolding that kept his company standing. Instead, I let out a slow breath and set the pen down on the papers. People tell the stories they need to believe so they can keep moving, I said. If hers helps her get out of bed, I can live with it. For now. He watched me for another moment, then nodded and slid the documents back toward me. Outside, hours later, I stood on the small balcony of my hotel room overlooking downtown Phoenix. The city glowed in patches, streetlights and office windows and digital billboards selling futures no one could guarantee. Cars moved along the freeway in steady lines of white and red. Somewhere in that grid, my daughter was probably still at her desk or on her couch, scrolling through other people's lives and trying to measure her own against them. I wrapped my arms around myself, not because I was cold, but because there was a weight in my chest that had nothing to do with money or contracts. Sadness, yes, but not the kind that knocked you down. It was a quieter thing, an ache layered with acceptance. The understanding that you can see every crack in someone's armor and still not be able to mend it for them. The night air smelled faintly of dust and distant rain. I let my eyes follow the lights until they blurred, then blinked them clear again, holding both the hurt and the strange calm that sat beside it, and waited for my heartbeat to settle into something that felt like resolve. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 4. The Day Everything Was Revealed.
By the time the Series C event came around, that feeling of resolve had settled into something steadier, like a stone at the bottom of a river. Guy had signed the papers. My name was on the documents. There was no going back. The announcement was scheduled for Thursday in Seattle, at a downtown hotel with too much glass and a view of the water that everyone kept mentioning as if it were part of the pitch. Nova Pulse had flown in key staff from Phoenix and other regional offices, along with clients, reporters, and the scattering of people in suits who smelled like investors, even if you never saw a business card. I arrived early and checked in under my own name. The woman at the registration table handed me a lanyard with a badge that read Strategic Investor in small, calm letters. She did not blink at the name. To her, I was just one more person in a sea of them. Inside the ballroom, rows of chairs faced a stage with a digital screen that cycled through the Nova Pulse logo, phrases about data and insight, and a bright graphic announcing the Series C milestone. Along one wall, cameras and lighting rigs waited for the show to start. Toward the back, a bar poured coffee and something sparkling into tall glasses. I found my assigned seat in the front section, near the middle aisle. It was close enough that I could see the fine print on the agenda card on my chair, but far enough from the stage that I did not feel like a prop. Around me, people murmured about valuations and market conditions and which other companies were raising rounds this quarter. I scanned the room almost without meaning to. It did not take long to spot Jenna. She stood near the media area, tablet in her hand, talking to a group of reporters with a focused smile. She wore a dark green dress that looked both professional and sharp, her hair smoothed back. A badge around her neck identified her as Senior Marketing Specialist. Every movement she made had an extra layer of polish, like she was conscious of an invisible camera. I watched her for a moment. There was pride there, under everything else. She was good at this, the choreography of words and angles. This kind of event was exactly the arena she had always wanted. She had no idea I was in the room. Music swelled softly through the speakers as people began to take their seats. The lights dimmed a little, and a Nova Pulse executive walked on stage to introduce the program. I listened through the familiar talking points about growth and innovation and vision for the future, the phrases rolling over me like the sound of rain when you had already checked the forecast. Then, they brought out Ryan. He stepped into the light with the easy confidence of someone who had practiced in front of a mirror. He thanked everyone for coming, cracked a gentle joke about early days in the cramped office with bad carpet, then guided the audience toward the point of the morning. He talked about the journey from seed funding to this moment. He referenced 2015 and the near miss in 2017, when the company almost ran out of cash. He mentioned a small group of early believers who had seen something worth saving and had put their money behind that belief. As he spoke, the lights shifted, focusing more tightly on him. Behind him, the screen changed, showing a timeline of funding rounds with numbers that made people sit up a little straighter. Then, he smiled and looked toward the audience. "There is one person in particular," he said, "whose early faith made all of this possible. Someone who did not ask to be visible back then, but who deserves to be seen now." My fingers curled around the edge of my seat. When he said my name, the sound seemed to land in the room and echo back at me from every corner at once. Please join me in thanking Marianne Hale. Light flooded the section where I sat. For a heartbeat, I thought about staying small, about pretending I had not heard him. But my body moved on its own. I rose to my feet as the people around me turned and looked. Some clapped, some just stared.
eyes flicking from my face to my badge and back. On stage, Ryan gave a small bow in my direction. Her investment in the early days kept Nova Pulse alive, and her continued commitment as our lead investor will carry us into this next chapter. Applause grew, filling the space. I felt oddly separate from it, as if I were watching someone else being honored. The internal camera crews were doing their job. One angled lens swept from the stage across the audience, lingering on me for a moment. On the side screens, my face appeared, slightly washed out by the lights, but unmistakably me. In that same sweep, the camera captured Jenna. She stood near the media area, tablet in her hand, talking to a group of reporters with a focused smile. She wore a dark green dress that looked both professional and sharp, her hair smoothed back. A badge around her neck identified her as Senior Marketing Specialist. Every movement she made had an extra layer of polish, like she was conscious of an invisible camera. I watched her for a moment. There was pride there, under everything else. She was good at this, the choreography of words and angles. This kind of event was exactly the arena she had always wanted. She had no idea I was in the room. Music swelled softly through the speakers as people began to take their seats. The lights dimmed a little, and a Nova Pulse executive walked on stage to introduce the program. I listened through the familiar talking points about growth and innovation and vision for the future. The phrases rolling over me like the sound of rain when you had already checked the forecast. Then, they brought out Ryan. He stepped into the light with the easy confidence of someone who had practiced in front of a mirror. He thanked everyone for coming, cracked a gentle joke about early days in a cramped office with bad carpet, then guided the audience toward the point of the morning. He talked about the journey from seed funding to this moment. He referenced 2015 and the near miss in 2017 when the company almost ran out of cash. He mentioned a small group of early believers who had seen something worth saving and had put their money behind that belief. As he spoke, the lights shifted, focusing more tightly on him. Behind him, the screen changed, showing a timeline of funding rounds with numbers that made people sit up a little straighter. Then, he smiled and looked toward the audience. "There is one person in particular," he said, "whose early faith made all of this possible. Someone who did not ask to be visible back then, but who deserves to be seen now." My fingers curled around the edge of my seat. When he said my name, the sound seemed to land in the room and echo back at me from every corner at once. Please join me in thanking Marianne Hale. Light flooded the section where I sat. For a heartbeat, I thought about staying small, about pretending I had not heard him, but my body moved on its own. I rose to my feet as the people around me turned and looked. Some clapped, some just stared, eyes flicking from my face to my badge and back. On stage, Ryan gave a small bow in my direction. Her investment in the early days kept Nova Pulse alive, and her continued commitment as our lead investor will carry us into this next chapter. Applause grew, filling the space. I felt oddly separate from it, as if I were watching someone else being honored. The internal camera crews were doing their job. One angled lens swept from the stage across the audience, lingering on me for a moment. On the side screens, my face appeared, slightly washed out by the lights, but unmistakable me. In that same sweep, the camera captured Jenna. She stood near the aisle, tablet in her hand, ready to capture content for company channels. When my image flashed on the screen, her eyes widened. For a second, the world seemed to narrow down to the look on her face. Her fingers slipped. The tablet tilted and would have crashed to the carpet if someone beside her had not grabbed it. Her mouth moved soundlessly first, then I saw the shape of the word, Mom. She said it again, barely audible over the applause. Mom. Why is that my mom? I sat back down when the spotlight shifted away. My heart hammered against my ribs, but the rest of me felt strangely steady. The program moved on. Charts and panels and video testimonials filled the next hour. I heard maybe half of it.
When it was over, people spilled into the foyer outside the ballroom, chattering, trading cards, rushing to catch flights. I spoke with a few board members and another investor, accepted their compliments with polite nods. Underneath the hum of conversation, I could feel a separate tension, like electricity searching for somewhere to discharge. I did not have to wait long. Jenna approached from the side, moving quickly, her steps tight. She looked pale under her makeup, her grip on the tablet white-knuckled. "Mom," she said, stopping a few feet in front of me, "we need to talk. Now." Her voice shook, but it carried enough command that the two people near me drifted away without protest. I nodded and let her lead the way down a side hallway, into a smaller lounge intended for speakers and VIPs. The door clicked quietly behind us, muting the noise from outside. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing hard, eyes locked on mine. "Why did you not tell me?" she demanded finally. "Why did you not say anything? I walked into your house and told you I was tired of supporting you, and the entire time you were the one keeping this company alive. You let me stand there and talk to you like that." Her voice rose on the last words, then cracked. I kept my own voice level. "You were not interested in listening to anything I might have said. You had already decided who I was." Her eyes filled, bright and angry. "You let me think you were a failure," she said. "You let me picture you alone and barely making it. I was telling people I was helping you. I was telling people I clawed my way out of nothing. Do you know how insane I feel right now?" "Yes, I do." She laughed once, brittle. "Why, Mom? Why live like that if you have money? Why drive that car and stay in that house and make me think you needed me to rescue you?" "I never asked you to rescue me," I said. "I did not tell you I was broke. You chose that story because it made sense to you, because it made you feel like you were far away from what you were afraid of becoming." She swallowed hard, looked away, then back at me. "Why keep this from me? Why keep Nova Pulse from me? This is my entire life. How could you not say you were behind it?" I took a breath. "Because I wanted you to have something that was yours, not your mother's company, not your mother's investment. I wanted you to build your own relationship with your work without wondering if people respected you or just your connection to a checkbook." She shook her head slowly, tears spilling over. "It still feels like a lie," she said. "Maybe. It is also the only way I knew to give you space. It clearly did not work the way I hoped." She sank onto a low couch, the tablet forgotten on the table. "There is something else you should know," I added. She looked up warily. "A few months ago, before we finalized the current agreement, there was talk at the board level about people whose roles might not be working out. Your name was on that list. Some people wanted you gone." Color drained from her face. "They were going to fire me," she whispered. "They were considering it," I said. "I asked for time. I asked them to give you another chance to prove you could adjust. I made it clear they were not to treat you any differently in day-to-day decisions, but I did push for them to not cut you off yet." She covered her mouth with her hand. For a moment, the only sound in the room was her breathing. "You did that for me."
she said softly. I am your mother. I am not going to pretend I don't care what happens to you. Her shoulders started to shake, all the tightness from the morning and from months before, finding its way out. When she finally spoke again, her voice was small. I have said horrible things about you to people I work with. I made you into this pathetic story so I could feel like I was winning, and the entire time you were the one holding everything together. Jenna, I said gently, you were trying to cope. It does not excuse it, but I understand. She wiped at her face, smearing her makeup. I don't know how to fix this, she said. I moved closer, close enough to rest my hand lightly on her shoulder. She flinched at the touch, then stayed still. You don't have to fix it all today, I said quietly. And you don't have to fight me. She looked up, eyes red, searching mine. You don't have to stop fighting yourself, I said. We sat that way in the soft hotel light, the noise of the celebration muffled beyond the door, both of us suspended in a fragile stillness that felt, for the first time in a long time, like the start of something different, rather than the end of something broken.
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 5. A softer kind of revenge. We flew back to our separate lives after Seattle, but the air between us had changed. It was not forgiveness, exactly, not yet. More like a ceasefire, sealed with a shaky understanding. We texted a few times that week, small things about her flight, about the rain in Portland, about a photo she sent of the Space Needle from the plane. For us, that was movement. 2 weeks later, Jenna messaged that she wanted to come up for a weekend. She did not dress it up as anything else. She asked if I would be home and if she could stay at the house instead of a hotel. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering that the door was open. She arrived on a Friday evening, no rolling suitcase this time, just a soft duffel and a backpack slung over one shoulder. Her hair was pulled into a loose knot, wisps escaping around her face. The sharp blazer and heels were gone, replaced by jeans and a sweatshirt with the Novo Pulse logo cracked from too many washes. She looked younger and more tired, but also more like the girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder in the back seat of the car. On the porch, she hesitated, looking at the house as if seeing it clearly for the first time. It is smaller than I remembered, she said, then shook her head. Or maybe I just made it smaller in my mind. I stepped aside so she could come in. The kitchen was the same as always, the same chipped mug on the counter, the same faded rug under the sink. She smiled at it this time, a small, almost embarrassed curve of her mouth. We made tea and sat at the table by the window. For a while, we talked about simple things, traffic on the way up, the way the trees were turning near the river, the new coffee shop that had opened in town. The conversation moved like someone testing ice on a lake, cautious, listening for cracks. Eventually, she wrapped her hands around her mug and stared down into it. I need to say some things out loud, she said, and I need you to let me say them before you answer. I nodded. I am scared all the time, she admitted. Not of anything specific, just this constant fear that I am going to slip and everything will disappear. That I will wake up and I will be back in some tiny apartment with nothing to show for myself. And everyone will know I failed. Every time something at work goes wrong, it feels like proof I am not enough. So I start looking for somewhere to throw that feeling. And you have been the easiest place to put it. She glanced up to see if I was angry. I was not. It made me feel better to tell people I was supporting you, she went on, like I was doing something noble, climbing out of some tragic story. I turned you into the symbol of what I did not want to become, so I could convince myself I was a success. It was selfish and cruel and not true.
Her eyes shone, but she kept going. "When I saw you on that stage," she said, "when I realized the company I talk about like it is my entire identity only exists in its current form because of you, I felt like someone had taken the floor out from under me. Not just because of the money, because I realized how little I actually knew you." I let that sit between us for a moment. "I did not tell you about Novopulse," I said, "because I wanted you to find your own way. When you got that job, you were so proud. You talked about the interview, about the projects you were excited to work on. I did not want to take that from you by making it about my checkbook. And I did not correct the story you were telling about me, because every time I tried to step toward the truth, you shut the door." "I know," she whispered. "I did not want to hear anything that did not fit the narrative I had built." I sipped my tea, feeling the warmth travel down my chest. "I did not hide my life to punish you," I said. "I did it to give you a chance to understand your own strength. Somewhere along the way, it twisted into something else. That part is on me." She reached across the table and brushed her fingers against mine. "I want to do better," she said, "at work, with you, with myself. I know I cannot just say that and have it be real, but I'm willing to do the work." That weekend, we moved gently around old scars. We cooked dinner together, something we had not done in years, bumping elbows and laughing when we reached for the same pan. We walked the trail by the river, and she asked questions about my early career, about the other companies I invested in, about what I saw in founders that made me say yes. For the first time, she wasn't comparing herself. She was just listening. On Sunday afternoon, as she packed her duffel, she paused. "When I get back to Phoenix," she said, "I am going to talk to Harper. I am going to ask her how I can actually fix the things she's been telling me, not just argue with her. I am going to ask for help with managing stress, with working in a team, and I'm going to try not to make everything a referendum on my worth." I smiled. "That sounds like a good place to start," I said. She hugged me at the door, arms wrapped tight. It wasn't a casual embrace, not a lean in and pat on the back. It was the kind of hug that says, "I'm holding on because I want to, not because I have to." True to her word, she called a few days later and told me how the meeting had gone. I went into Harper's office and told her I knew I had been difficult. I asked her if she would help me build a development plan. She did not go easy on me, but she said she was willing if I was serious. She's signing me up for workshops on communication and stress management, and she wants regular check-ins. It's humbling, but in a good way. And Jonas, she added after a pause, sent me a message after the Seattle event. He said he was proud of me for not melting down and for actually listening to what people were saying. He told me he thinks I could be a great leader if I stopped trying to win every argument. That meant more than I expected. I could hear the shy hope in her voice. It sounded unfamiliar and precious. While Jenna was reworking her life in Phoenix, mine would turn to its own steady rhythm in Portland. I read reports from Novopulse, answered the occasional call from Ryan about strategic questions, sat in on a board meeting over video, and listened to talk of timelines and market windows. In one of those calls, he thanked me for keeping my promise, for not using my position to shield Jenna from consequences. "You've been fair, more than fair. I appreciate that." I told him fairness was the point. If she stayed, it would be because she earned it. If she left, it would be because that was the right choice for her, not because strings had been pulled behind her back. A few months later, another packet arrived by courier, this one thicker than the last. It outlined an expansion of the Series C round, an opportunity to increase my stake in advance of some new partnerships. There were pages of numbers and legal language and scenarios, all of it familiar in a way that felt almost comfortable. At the end was a place for my signature and a cover letter mentioning that as part of the step, the board would be formalizing its approach to performance reviews, asking lead investors to affirm their commitment to objective standards for all senior staff. I signed the documents at my kitchen table, the same spot where Jenna had once accused me of dragging her down, the same wood now holding new weight. When I sent them back, I included a short note to Ryan and the head of human resources, stating plainly that my expectation is that every employee, including my daughter, be evaluated by the same criteria as everyone else. No favors, no punishments. Just the truth. Spring came slowly to Portland, rain giving way to days of clean light. On one of those afternoons, Jenna flew up for a short visit. She talked about small wins at work, about a campaign that landed well, about the fact that she was learning to say she messed up without immediately reaching for a shield. She said it still made her stomach twist, but it no longer felt like the end of the world. We walked in a park near my house, under trees just starting to leaf out. The path dappled with sun. Children shrieked in the distance near a playground. A couple walked past us with a dog that decided we were worth a sniff. It is strange how much lighter everything feels now that I'm not working so hard to pretend I'm fine. It usually does, I answered. She slipped her arm through mine, resting her head briefly on my shoulder, the way she used to when she was small. I'm not saying I'm suddenly a perfect daughter or that I won't have days where I backslide, but I see you more clearly now. And I see myself more clearly too. That feels like a kind of justice. A softer kind, I said. We walked on in comfortable silence, the kind that had eluded us for years. The shadows on the path were long, and the air smelled like earth and new things. If there is anything I have learned from all of this, it's that not every reckoning has to be loud to matter. Sometimes the sharpest revenge is not slamming a door or exposing a secret, but quietly refusing to be the version of yourself that someone else wrote for you. Sometimes it's letting the person who underestimated you see exactly how wrong they were, not with speeches, but with the life you go on to live. And sometimes, if you are very lucky,
It is watching someone you love grow past the story that hurt you both. If you have ever stood on that kind of edge with someone, if you have ever wondered what might happen if the truth finally came out, stay a while with stories like this. You might see a piece of yourself in them, and maybe, just maybe, they will remind you that the gentlest kind of revenge is also the one that leaves the most room for both people to become something better than they were before.